when I was a kid, I could see these energy fields, and then I shut it down because it was making my mother nervous. And when I had the big openings that I had, it came back again. And so when I witnessed someone opening their heart through and through, like from the backside, and receiving this really divine flow of essence that's pouring into us all the time, it actually looks like something begins to open. Welcome back to the Art of Awakening podcast, where the art of living awake becomes a daily practice. I'm your host, Dr. Sue Morter, and I am very, very happy to be bringing to you a very special guest, Suzanne Giesemann. She is a spiritual teacher, an evidential medium, and an author, and she is dedicated constantly to helping other people to connect with higher consciousness, their true self, and to bridge the gap between the seen and the unseen worlds. It is right up my alley, right up your alley. I know it is why we come together here on this podcast. And so let me just tell you a little bit about Suzanne. She's an author of the newly expanded book, Making the Afterlife Connection, which offers practical tools and insights to help readers connect with spirit and their own divine nature. And I have to say that I had the wonderful pleasure of being on Suzanne's podcast not too long ago. We connected. We were instant friends in a kindred spirit in very deep and rich ways. And so I know that you're going to love what she has to say. I can't wait to get to know her more and more and more over the months and years to come.
Yeah.
So Suzanne, welcome to.
Thank you so much. I just love being in your energy and then sharing with everyone here. Wonderful.
It's like it's the best, right? To be in this conversation, it's like what else is there? This is what matters the most. So so we get to dive in. I know that many of our listeners know who you are, and for anyone who's just meeting you, if you can share a little bit with our listeners about your time as a Navy commander to becoming a spiritual teacher. That's a very big, broad spectrum that you're covering, and brings such an amazing and beautiful perspective to what it is that we are doing when we finally drop into truly what matters most in the world. So what inspired this incredible journey? How did it get underway?
Yeah, I had a pretty happy life growing up. Somewhat dysfunctional parents, but I think most humans are. And so, but I was raised with no spirituality, no religion. Went into the military right out of college and served 20 years as a Navy officer. Very left brain. And my spiritual coping tool for any challenge in life was the Navy's motto, suck it up. And that was not very helpful when I was at the Pentagon and flying over Manhattan on 9/11. I was in the last aircraft in U.S. airspace as aide to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. So I really did serve at the highest level of the U.S. military and had no idea there was anything higher than this level. And and after 9/11, being so up close and personal with that, I put in my retirement papers, and the day I had 20 years in, off I went the very next day with my husband, literally sailing into the sunset to run away from life. My husband was not running away, but I was. I had just had it after 9/11. And life basically caught up with us in the fact that I had a lot more to learn. And it caught up with us in the death of my stepdaughter, Susan. She was a sergeant in the Marine Corps and was crossing the flight line when a bolt of lightning came out of the blue sky and struck her. They worked on her for 7 hours and couldn't save her or her 6-month unborn baby. So, so now I had to ask those questions that I just put aside before. Like, why do some people die before a full-length life? And that's what started me asking the questions, but really what kick-started my journey was seeing Susan's body at her funeral in the coffin and just having this moment of knowing that her body looked so different from the vibrant Susan we knew, that there had to be something that enlivens these bodies. And I said, I'm going to find you, Susan. And that started a daily meditation practice that turned into so much more than finding Susan. It opened me to this greater reality that's been here all along. But if we're really focused on our lives here, we just don't notice it.
Yeah, it's like a limited use of our senses that we've been trained to use. And so when the deep, meaningful questions are upon us that this linear world that we've been so focused up on can't answer, then the blinders start to broaden. It starts to come back, and we have to teach ourselves how to use, the rest of who we are, our faculties in ways that they just haven't been honed, but they're there
Yeah.
waiting for
Yeah.
our attention. And that's, the beautiful reassurance that anyone can ultimately open up to a bigger life, a greater life, a deeper love, a deeper understanding of what's going on in this world. And so, it's so interesting that you had this poignant moment at a funeral. Something similar happened in my life. It's just this moment where I recognized that, wait a second, I'm identifying as the wrong part of this program. I don't want to be the one that gets, in the box, and I want to be the one that goes on. It was a conversation that said, when Nancy passed and when Nancy died, her spirit went on. I was like, oh my gosh, that's not going to be me. I'm going to be the one who goes on, and I'm going to get to know that one. And that was the beginning of my path as well. So, what a beautiful thing. So then what happened
Well,
after that?
what has really shifted my life is coming to know that not only is this greater reality full of beings at multiple levels, but we can interact with them. It's very interactive. We can have conversations and get evidence. This is the part that has changed my life. The fact that you can ask for verifiable information that you can't possibly know, and those in the non-physical realms will give it to you. So I I am a medium, but my principal mission is to show people this greater reality is here. What does that mean for us here and now? It's wonderful to talk to our loved ones who have passed and to get evidence from them, but how does that translate into shining our light more brightly while we're here? That's the extension of mediumship that takes it beyond just a 1 hour reading with someone to a life-changing realization of who we are.
Yes. So what happened from the moment that you saw her body and realized, oh my gosh, there's something more that's now no longer here? How did this start to open doorways for you? What began to happen that you started sensing and feeling beyond the world that you had previously been paying attention to?
It was a daily practice of what we now know as meditation, but I didn't even know what meditation was in 2006. For me, it was a practice where you find more peace, but okay, I'm going to lower my blood pressure with meditation. That's what it was to me back then. So I didn't bother with it. But I knew that the key to connecting with Susan would be to sit quietly and just close my eyes and say, reveal yourself to me in some way. And I was not going to stop until I sensed her. But as you know, when you sit quietly and have a focus, you can't quiet the mind completely, but you do start to notice what stands out from the normal chatter in your mind. And what started to stand out were things that I couldn't possibly know and sensations of presence that I questioned and interacted with. And it just opened up this whole other reality that I could not deny. And what's funny is that Susan deliberately held back for 3 years. She did not come to me despite daily asking for her to show up. I was already doing readings for other people when she finally came through to me on Father's Day, 3 years after she passed. And she said to me years later, she couldn't have come earlier because I would have stopped meditating. I was supposed to be on this path. And she's absolutely right. If she had showed up within the first couple weeks or a month, I would have been, hey, Ty,
That's
Susan's
right.
here. We did it. Mission accomplished, right? Never been it.
Exactly.
Go back to my
Right.
normal life. But
Yeah.
I was determined.
So you were brokenhearted. You were
Mm.
sitting in silence. You were just wanting to connect. You were cracked open, and you began asking. And so you began to see other things. So you began to have other signs, or a presence was becoming obvious to you. It wasn't her directly, but you were starting to connect with this realm beyond. And can you recall some of the first things that started to surface for you, that started to really animate in a way?
What's really phenomenal is that, and that this is phenomenal for everybody, once you start sitting in silence and expanding your consciousness, it doesn't just expand when you're in the moment. It carries over into your day-to-day life, as you know. And so I started to not only find that I was more peaceful and less reactive to other people's emotions, but I started to know things intuitively, but not just intuitively about my own life, psychically about other people. I can remember very early on sitting at a party. We just met some people and they said, "Oh, we're from Indiana." And I thought, "No, you're from Michigan." And where did that come from? And then I called them on it. And they said, "How did you know that?" Well, yeah, we just moved from Michigan. And it was just one of those crazy things. And then another instance, not too long afterwards, my father was in the hospital. His doctor stepped out of the room. We'd never met this man. And my brother looked at me and I said, "I wonder where he's from." And I looked at my brother and I said, "Ghana." And we both went, "Where did that come from?" And the man was from Ghana. So I was tapping into the field of greater consciousness, but didn't know it because I didn't know that field existed.
This is so beautiful. And you
Yeah.
know what? I know this happens to people all the time, but they dismiss it because they're trained in their minds to only listen to certain cues. And but these thoughts come and people don't even let it register. I know it happens all the time. It's so fascinating, Suzanne. I have a similar history. I didn't have experience with meditation at all when these openings started happening. I started having this multidimensional reality just come into my tangible experience. And I think that it's because we weren't trying for anything. Except that we were broken open and we were available. And what was happening was it was becoming evident because our senses were present, we're just available. We weren't busy doing specifics. We were just there
Well,
in
I
these
do
very
have to say that in my case, I was trying. I had that singular focus,
Mhm.
Susan, but that was the key, that I did have one focus. So I do recommend that people take into it. Don't just sit there and try to be quiet because the mind will wander.
Yeah.
Have
My
perhaps a
singular
twist.
focus was on, I'm going to do something for me for the first time in my life. I'm just going to sit down. And so it was about what's in my heart, what's here for me, what's my purpose, da da da. So I totally get. So go ahead, please, please,
No,
please.
that was it. And then my other focus was not only meditation that cracked me open, it was taking my husband to a medium. And we had only recently learned what mediums are and what they do. So this is key, that now I'm um, very happy with my connection as an evidential medium, but I wasn't born that way. We all have this ability, but I never saw spirits, never knew I would be able to do this. So that gives hope to all of us. But the reading with the medium, who didn't know our last name, could not have Googled us, just forced me to completely shift my worldview. Forced me because there was no other explanation for how she knew so many things about Susan, because Susan was right there in that reading. It left my husband and I sobbing with relief, with awe, with joy. And so I had to adjust. I was in a daze for days thinking, this is real. I mean, I knew it. That's why I'm trying to connect with Susan, but to have it in your face from an outsider. Yeah, there's this young woman here in a brown uniform, and she passed very suddenly in her 20s, and she's bringing with her a little baby boy she wants to introduce to you. Susan was pregnant with a boy. There's no other explanation for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, I've had those experiences myself with mediumship, and I'm so appreciative that you allowed yourself to be open enough to traverse this broad spectrum from, military officer of high ranking, very devoted, very focused, into the regimen that is required for you to ever get there. That generates a very qualified mental body that is, focused on here's what life is and here's how you work with it successfully and to get the outcomes that you're looking for. And the world presses us into something similar, not nearly as regimented, but it presses humanity into, a lane, and that you allowed yourself to broaden into the open territory is truly a beautiful thing. Can you share anything that happened inside of you physically that you were feeling as you were witnessing this clarity starting to open inside of you? I mean, obviously you'd heard someone who knew things that they couldn't possibly know about a beloved of yours. And then you started then to open in some ways. Can you track anything physiologically that was going on inside of you
Oh, yes.
as that was happening?
And I traveled to England to study with the best mediums over there once I realized that I could tap into the greater reality. And physically, I would get a lip twitch. It might happen today. I can't show it to you, but when it happens, it's when I drop into a really coherent state and my guides want to get my attention. It's kind of ugly. It looks like Elvis sneering. But anybody that follows my work knows that twitch because they've seen it happen right before Spirit says something. And then also, my finger would start twitching on its own. It's really bizarre to say, I'm not doing that. What is that? And it was a signal, pick up your pen. There are words coming for you to write. And then a lightheadedness. So I've learned early on, pay attention to this body. It's a messenger itself. And now when I do readings, I've given permission to those in the non-physical realms to make me like their little pincushion. I get the physical symptoms of those who pass as a way of showing evidence. This is them. I just did a reading yesterday, and the woman, I knew she wanted to hear from her mother. I get pulled over to where I feel mothers. That's a physical thing in itself. My head gets pulled like a pendulum, and then my heart literally palpitated, and I couldn't catch my breath. Oh, I said, oh, when these two happen like that, this is congestive heart failure that your mother passed from. And she goes, yes, exactly. And then it immediately passes from my bodies. It's uncomfortable in the moment, but I say bring it on because it's so evidential.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just like hearing anything shocking with our outer ears, we have responses. And so you naturally have a response to the information that's coming through in the invisible world as well. It makes perfect sense. It hits our system, etc. And so inside of trying to show someone how to begin to turn this kind of thing on, are there introductory ideas or practices that you recommend for people?
It's something as simple as self-inquiry, being willing to ask the questions of yourself. What is my belief about the spirit world? Is it broad enough? What are my beliefs about my ability to connect personally without a medium? Do I believe that's true? What is my BS is what I tell everybody, and that stands for belief system, and then shift it. Be willing to be playful and curious and not worry about what other people think. You don't have to tell them what you're doing or what you're discovering in expanded states. And then that personal experience of being in an expanded state. I very much recommend the natural method of carving out a little time for silence every day and paying attention to what you're sensing with all the senses.
Yeah. So I go into these altered states when I'm teaching it, but it works in tandem with what I'm doing and how whatever points are coming up or that we're answering in question form or what have you. And there's a certain thickness in the air around me, and I feel something very different transpiring in my brain, in the center of my brain, and sort of forward, and all sorts of physiological things happen in terms of the hair standing up and just this presence is here. Are there things that you think people overlook often that are likely happening with them, that are signs that they too are just on the edge of this veil, that they could pierce right through or soften the veil enough to be able to trust their inner guidance? And what would that be?
That guidance is around us all the time. And so it really is important to educate ourselves about the way spirit makes their presence known. And one of the most important things is understanding that because our mind is part of one shared mind, we're one little whirlpool in a whole sea of consciousness, we often don't realize that our brilliant thoughts are not always our own. That those in the spirit world are putting thoughts into our mind that we think are our own. Oh, I think I'll go get my nails done today. Huh. Okay. And you go and you sit down at the nail salon next to somebody who has just what you needed to hear, or is somebody you needed to meet. And then you look back and you say, where did that thought come from? I could tell stories of those thoughts for hours, and people would start to pay attention to their own thoughts. And then, of course, synchronicities. Pull the thread. I teach people a technique called watching for snags. What just catches your attention as you're walking through a room you walk through every day, but suddenly you're walking past the bookshelf and one title catches your attention? That's the way spirit communicates with you. So set the intention to notice when something snags you, and then look at it and pull the thread. Say, well, why, Spirit, did that particular title catch my attention? Or why did that plant or that lampshade? Any random thing Spirit will use. Why did you look at the clock right when it was 4:44? Okay, did somebody have a message for me? It becomes interactive.
Mm-hmm. And what people recognize is that, oh, I do see a lot of 1111s or 444s, or I do start to sense this, and I did pick up a book, and it's connecting the dots in their consciousness. And how do you suggest that when people are starting to notice all these things, that they translate it into or make themselves available to what is trying to get my attention? What am I supposed to glean? And how do we keep people from getting pulled in so many directions? Because there are signs everywhere all the time. And we want to develop a language that can, assimilate this information, through our systems in a way that allow us to not be pulled by the wind in all these different directions, but to have some synchronicity to it, or some continuity to it, so flow that keeps them grounded and at the same time opening to more.
So open a journal or create a document on your computer and give it a name like Awesome Spiritual Experiences and start documenting them. That's what I did in the beginning. And you start to connect the dots, and you can easily then point out what was a synchronicity versus just something that wasn't meaningful. The thing with synchronicities is there's true meaning, and it comes with a feeling in the body. This is truth. Pay attention. So start documenting, and mine just became ridiculously long, to also have something to go back to when the left hemisphere of your brain starts to cause doubt. Oh, I'm making all this up. It's not related. But then the second part of this is to engage in two-way communication, trusting that some aspect of higher consciousness is guiding you. And we use terms like spirit guides. Some people say, oh, that's silly. Well, so some aspect of higher consciousness, whatever you want to call it, it's there. It will interact with you. It's all one source ultimately. So we love to put things in little categories and give them names. And if that's helpful, do that. Otherwise, just say, like I say, hey, spirit. Instead of, I have a new book called Always Connected, and it talks about the fact that we've become accustomed to turning to our phone and saying, hey, SIRI. If I say it, my phone might go off right now. We turn it down. But if you just add the P and the T and instead say, hey, spirit, is that a coincidence, or is there something I'm supposed to know here? And then pause to listen for an answer or feel an answer. No, something just happened here.
Yeah. I often find that it sometimes is in direct statements that sound like this booming, voice of God, this voice of the divine, just like, boom, do this, immerse yourself, awaken, this kind of thing. But sometimes it's not that at all. And I think that people really need to hear about other ways that response comes, little nuances, little nudges, little senses, or we just find ourselves thinking that we're going to do one thing, but we end up doing something else. There's when we're open in this way. So are there other ways, things that you could drop into the conversation that are other ways that intelligence speaks, how we can translate it, hear it, catch it, not miss it?
Once you realize that all creatures, not just humans, share this field of consciousness, you come to understand that just like birds will fly in a flock and all
Yeah.
move at once, they have a shared field consciousness, a group consciousness. And so those in spirit will use that hyper attunement of animals and birds and insects to get them to do things to get our attention. So as silly as it sounds that a bird might be pecking at your window for days on end,
Yeah.
you can actually ask spirit, why is this bird here? Or ask the bird, but it's much easier to go higher than to the bird.
Yeah.
Is somebody sending you? I did a reading in a controlled laboratory at the University of Arizona with Dr. Gary Schwartz, where I was connecting with the loved one of one of his students. He was sitting behind me watching, and I said, your boyfriend just said he sends you birds, like remote control. He controls their consciousness. And he says the birds think it's fun. And Dr. Schwartz said, what did you just say? And I repeated myself. And he said, another medium sat here in that same seat last week with a different client and said the exact same thing. I love, it's metaphoric, of course,
Yes.
but I love
Yeah.
it. We just simply across the veil say, hey, I see a dove over there, and there's my mom. I'm going to get that dove to fly over and sit right in front of her and sing. And maybe she'll pick up my heart connection with her and know it's a message from me.
Yes. It's just so beautiful because, this whole essence, spirit, the universe, the creation, the essence itself is delighting in creating. And when we can join in on that, we're actually tapping into our true nature. We're actually allowing that creative essence to move through us. And so I find that it's helpful to perceive myself as part of that delightful flow of creation so that I'm not separate from something I'm trying to connect to, but that I'm actually aligning with it and becoming one with that frequency so that I can too enjoy the wholeness of creation and the knowingness that the birds have as they're flying in unison, or the fish swimming in unison, everyone turning at the same time. We all have access to that same thing if we just resonate there.
And turning up that feeling of joy really makes a difference. I'm smiling the whole time you're saying that because joy is my word for that flow of the essence of all of us. It's joy. It's spirit source,
Beautiful.
but joy. And you kept saying enjoy, and that's what we are allowing joy to do through us.
Yes. So that comes really close to a question I wanted to ask you about love, and that you say that love is the bridge between the physical and the spiritual realms. Can you just say more about how you'd like to bring that into the conversation?
Yes. To me, the best definition of love is a lack of separation, an awareness that we're totally connected. Think about when you fall in love with someone. You don't see any of their faults. You're just focusing on what that total connection you have, and then the faults come later, right? But in the meantime, if we know that we all come from one shared field of joy, then that field is love. And if we want to tap into other aspects of that field, then we become coherent. We become love itself, love in expression. And then the connection is natural. So when I do a reading, one of the first things I do when I sit down is I sit with my client and I say, let's imagine a cord. Remember how we used to talk through cans with a string? Just imagine that string from between our hearts, soul to soul, to just light up that love connection. Then we send love to their loved ones in spirit, and that helps us remember why we're doing this, to turn up the love, to remember the love they share with their loved one, and it makes all the difference in a connection.
Yeah, it also kind of creates a filtering system, like we're sorting for love. We're sorting for what matters most.
Yeah.
And that deep, rich, meaningful vibrational frequency of that loving connection, that deep, wonder and support and guidance and care and tenderness, that generates the realm in which we can exchange through this veil that is made of rules and regulations and black and whiteness and either orness and such that people have become so adopted into. So we want to give people another way of approaching life, knowing they can be successful, they can still make sense at work, they can still hold logical conversations, they can still make a difference in their lives and move forward and progress, probably even more so when they open to the beyond logic, the beyond the regular and the familiar and maybe even the comfortable, and to really allow for something more to be soaking into their lives and to become more permeable to that.
It's very relevant to the workplace and the family, to all relationships, to realize that we came here to be both human and souls, that we can have our conflicts at work. We can butt heads and still see the soul in that person and laugh at ourselves, and say, okay, how might I resolve this from a higher level? It just takes you beyond the normal human relationships, and it's such a blessing.
Which allows us to find our edge and to expand. Like, how can I love into this situation that at first glance doesn't seem very lovable at all? How can I open here? It's that same exercise that happens when we open to someone in the workplace or across the dinner table from us in a particular situation or whatever the circumstance is. I find that it's a similar sensation in my system when I just am not interested in being right. I'm not interested in trying to teach somebody something. I'm just interested in, who are you? What's happening here? What matters to you? And be in touch with their story and where they're coming from in this life. There's a physiological shift that opens. And I find that it's a very similar sensation that just continues to open, that allows me to access really beyond this physical dimension altogether, and to be in touch with this greater truth that is actually pouring into this life all the time.
You just reminded me of something that I learned the hard way, and it took me many years to learn, that yes, we're really good at spreading love once we realize who we are and sharing it, radiating it with the world. But I discovered by going and speaking at conferences that when people would come around me all the time, it was so much energy that what happened is I was shutting off the back of the heart chakra, not realizing that's a thing, which of course it is. And so I would get really off balance because the flow wasn't there. And I believe that most people don't realize we're walking around guarding ourselves. And so you may be loving, but there's a part of you that's not receiving that loving energy from the universe. If you just take a moment and pause and visualize the back of the heart chakra opening, it's a relief to feel that flow come again.
It is so soothing. And, when I look into the field, when I was a kid, I could see these energy fields, and then I shut it down because it was making my mother nervous. And, I was talking about stuff she couldn't see. And so I just shut it down, and I tried to get it back in my 20s and 30s. And then when I had the big openings that I had, it came back again. And so when I witnessed someone opening their heart through and through, like from the backside, and receiving this really divine flow of essence that's pouring into us all the time, it actually looks like something begins to open, and it looks like wings. Yes, it looks like wings. It's like, wow, that's where it comes from, because for us to be able to be in that celestial consciousness and still be here being human, which is what's happening with mediumship. You're tapping into that realm and you're bringing it through here. And to allow it to come through, the conduit has to be open.
That's right.
So the angelic realm is open in that way, and it's pouring that information, stepping it down, what I feel, to being closer to human consumption. And so in our own channel, our own mediumship, we have the ability to receive, to listen, to hear, to get it, to catch it, and to know that same information without it being so distorted the way that we create distortions by running everything through our mind first. We have to allow the heart to be involved in our receptivity of information. And that seems like sort of what you're saying as well, that Love has to be in the mix. It's the bridge between the worlds.
It
So
does.
that means that the heart energy is harmonizing more with the mental energy that happens in our, cerebrum, and that harmonic, really convergence allows for us to translate information that we didn't think we had access to in the first place.
Yeah, I want to make a very important point about that, that many of my clients are in deep grief, and they smile when they come on the screen because that's what we do. But inside, they're just, like you said, they're broken apart and grieving, and I can feel that. And so they may think, well, I can't feel very loving right now. So the medium just turns the love up to compensate for that. But a lot of people ask me, is my grief going to interrupt my own connection with my loved one? And I say that it can, but grief comes in waves. So just wait till you're not bowled over by the grief in those moments when there's a little bit of peace, and now try to make your own connection. And that will lessen over time.
So beautiful. I know when my mother passed, took me out, and I was down for 3 weeks just sitting in my backyard and, just trying to make sense out of how I was, super connected and such. And it was through my grief that communication started to happen. It was because I was grieving and just loving. And it reminds me of a teacher that I had, who had had her awakenings in her life and gone to India and lived and studied and came back and was teaching through a Hindu perspective. But she was working with many people that were afflicted by AIDS and the death and the dying that was in the guilt and the shame that was associated with that whole time back in the 80s. And she would work with people regularly to get them to connect with, themselves and their own highest purpose and so on. And she would say about grieving a departed, that when we're in our deepest pain, we might not be able to connect and sense that connection. But when we move into the appreciation of the love that we have experienced with this person, and we're in the celebration of how much we love, and that's why we hurt so much, is because of how much we love, that the doors fly wide open in those
That's the
moments.
appreciation piece, and
Yeah.
the gratitude, appreciation, care, and compassion. Those four are the keys to creating a coherent field.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yes. How beautiful. Beautiful. I just absolutely love this. And so you've said that the spiritual connection is everyone's birthright. How do people trust what they're seeing, or sensing or feeling? How
Now, you'll
when
love
we have,
this.
yeah.
It's by learning to feel your body and how it reacts to what you're sensing. And I've learned to, I talk about getting out of the head and into the heart, but let's go even deeper, get into the belly, the gut, the hara, and feel how what you're sensing feels there. Is it solid or is it wispy? A real visit from a loved one in your dreams is solid. It doesn't disappear in the morning like when you're trying to tell your partner, oh, I had this crazy dream. I can't even remember it now. But a loved one's visit, you never forget it. So when you sense something at any time from a loved one across the veil, don't just wonder in your head, was that real? Was that them? Test it in your heart. Yeah, you'll know. But now move it down to the gut. How does this feel as you sit with that? There's a knowing there as well.
Mm-hmm. This is so beautiful. And this is right up my alley in terms of bringing this love down to this deep wisdom core, in this hara and down and around the navel, and just breathing there all the time and bringing life force to that so that it's alive and animated, sort of like a soaked sponge instead of a dry sponge. It's ready and available to help us translate when our attention can go to, through these veils and still be managing this life that we're living.
But I'll tell you that I learned about the hara only last year. My guides brought it up to me 2 years ago. When I started working with it, the evidence that was coming through in readings jumped. It just went to a new level. But then I forgot about it because I wasn't practiced in sitting in awareness of the hara
Mm.
until I herniated a disc in my back. the pain in that whole area was so intense. I started asking Spirit, what's going on here? What does this have to share with me? Because I consider all pain an opportunity for some message. And it brought me right back to the hara. And I was shown that I had spent a lifetime of guarding with my body. We all carry trauma. In my case, I was involved in the invasion of Panama in the military. I just sucked it up, right? We had Susan's death. We had up close and personal on 9/11. We all have our times. And I thought I processed those, but yeah, emotionally, but physically, I was always carrying tension. And I had to learn to relax with that herniated disc. And I realized that I was guarding. And since then, I'm just so much more open. People even say to me, you seem so much softer, which I kind of say, oh my God, what was I like before then? But
Right.
right, it's the
Oh,
commander. The commander was still here. But I've learned that most people have back issues or digestive issues because that area of the body has been ignored. And it's the center of us. So important to love it, pay attention to it, and put your awareness there and sense from there. The signal is so much more stable and solid when we do
right.
that.
Because it transcends our belief system. We don't have to run energies through the amygdala and the hippocampus, and we're not drawing off of subconscious memories that are constantly bombarding us, and we're not comparing and competing with our past, or we're not trying to outperform. We're just here. It's the body doesn't lie. It's just truth. Truth really traverses through the body without any sort of distortion. And so how lovely that you had a herniated disc
Yeah, really.
to bring you into amplification of your own gifts that were already starting to birth, so beautifully in
And
you
it
and your life.
lasted months, and you just keep saying, why won't this go away? Because you have a lifetime of habits and patterns to repattern.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it feels so good when that solar plexus, the diaphragm, the muscles that are on guard all the time, when they start melting and releasing, it's like somebody just turns on the jacuzzi, It's just like I can't believe I missed this, that I've been living my whole life without knowing where to sit deep inside my own system and allow for this flooding of this divine energy, truly this essence spirit, to just pour right through my system.
That's it. I'm laughing because if you'll allow me, I have to share the greatest cosmic joke played on me. This whole thing with the back started a year ago, this next month, when an energy healer identified a block at the solar plexus. They said it's between your heart and hara, and you've been carrying it around for 30 years, and it comes from your ex-husband. And I said, really? I'm not aware of this. And I wasn't. But he showed me how to remove it myself with intention and a little ceremony.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I started laughing because my ex-married name, the last name was Block. I mean, my ex-husband's last name, my name was Block. So I'm carrying around this block for 30 years. But once that was removed, this flooding of energy you're talking about hit that lower part of the body that wasn't used to all that energy, and the disc herniates. It was just such a lesson from spirit. And if anybody listening can realize these aren't punishment, they're opportunities, like we said, to just love your body and say, what have you been trying to tell me? I'm ready to listen.
Yeah. And there are direct correlations to the areas in the body that are being impacted. If you're carrying the weight of the world on your own shoulders, your low back is like, man, I'm not built for that. Please don't make me do that. But if we open to this flow and we allow for this connection to spirit, to essence, to that true essential reality that is where we come forth from, there's so much support and guidance happening, and we're not having to ask our minds to do something that they weren't built to do. When, like, what you're describing is an example of receiving guidance receiving instead of deliberating and trying to make it all work in your logical mind. There's more available to us. And right use of the mind is to really steward the soul. It's to support and steward and amplify this soulful essence that you're speaking of.
You have to pardon me. I could show it to you right now. The whole time you're talking, this dove has come up on my windowsill and is
Oh,
pecking at the window. Isn't that the example I gave earlier?
hey, the dove of hope has arrived. We
So
love
what Dr. Sue was saying just then, Spirit said,
Hey,
pay attention.
that's the one. That's the one.
That was
Oh,
wild.
yes. Well, that's how it works. That's a
Yeah,
perfect example, right?
exactly. I use
That's
the
it.
example of the dove, and this dove comes and sits right there on the windowsill. That's crazy. But
Wow.
this is the way.
Yeah.
I'm
Right.
doing it.
Right. Nothing gets to be crazy for us
No,
anymore, right? It's all crazy.
wonderful.
So, for anyone who is hearing this and feeling inspired, and it's having an effect on them, like, why can't I?
Mm,
I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm feeling lost.
um,
Must be the only one.
mm-mm.
Why not me too? What can we do right there?
Oh, right there, you have just given yourself the key to your salvation. That's a story. Why
Hmm.
can't I? Is your story. And you start to realize, what if there's more than this story? What if this I that I've been relating to, the poor me victim, and I can't do this, and is this limited, restricted version of a you with limitless possibilities? So when you get stuck and you're not doing something, that's the story. And you set the intention to work with spirit and say, show me who I am beyond the story. Bring on the miracles. I'm ready.
Mm-hmm.
I'm ready. And I'm willing to give up the story with all its, I have to get the evidence. I have to have the signs. This is how it has to go for me to believe it. I surrender. Just show me what is needed for the greatest good of myself and all those around me. So it's recognizing that all of our demands are part of a story, but spirit
Yeah.
already knows how to flow for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. When I first started opening up in this way, I didn't have outcomes that were in the outer world. I didn't see miraculous things, occurring in my outer world. But I had a feeling inside,
Mm.
and that I was so relieved that I had discovered tending to myself, just allowing my consciousness to land on myself instead of always. I was a big caretaker, always taking care of everybody else and always being aware of everything that needed to happen in the room for everybody to be okay. And the
That's
problem was I was kind of,
exhausting.
yeah, I was good at it, but it was exhausting, right? And so I wasn't any good at it because it's only a part of who we are. And so what might show up first for someone is just a feeling of presence, like I'm coming home to myself. I'm going to be right here for me in a way that I haven't been before. And that starts things moving in this other direction instead of just this runaway train of feeling overwhelmed and feeling lost and outside of ourselves. And so I think it's very important that we allow ourselves some simple starting points that we know are connected to what you're saying right now. Oh, how beautiful. So, if someone was just getting started with this and they were just starting to engage, um, any recommendations for them about how to translate and interpret things accurately without, distortion?
Well, we've touched on that already by dropping awareness into the gut and feeling how it feels in the body. But I have a practice I call the sip of the divine, 3 minutes a day, just 3 minutes to notice how the mind works, to just sit quietly and perhaps ask a question, what do I need to know now? So that's your focus.
Mm.
And just watch how the thoughts come up. And as they do, let them go if it's normal thoughts. If it's not the answer to your question, just let it go. And you start to notice how many of your thoughts are unproductive or self-deprecating, right? They are put downs. And then suddenly something will stand out from the silence. And you'll say, where did that come from? So now engage that. Okay, well, maybe I made that up, but is it helpful? Okay, so let's act on that. And it just becomes a practice of listening, acting, sensing, and you come to recognize what you can trust versus what is your just made up, not helpful.
Yes, it's really fascinating. Quantum science is showing us that there's no one out there, that actually the whole thing we're making up the whole thing, that it's this agreed upon reality that we're all creating. We're co-creating this whole illusionary movie that we're all walking into. I mean, that's really where they're going with their understanding of what's happening, and spirituality has said that for thousands of years in deep Eastern traditions. So even if we are making something up with what we're perceiving, if
Yeah.
it's helpful,
That's it.
then allow your consciousness to go that way. I think people are so afraid, well, what if I'm just making it up? Well, we're making up everything. So
That's exactly right. And this reality is very real when we're in it. Pain is pain. It really hurts. You don't step into a car because it's an imaginary in front of a car because it's imaginary. It's very real while
yeah,
you're in it. But meditation shows you that it is a separate reality, because I've heard Dr. Donald Hoffman say meditation is like taking off the headset and putting on a different program, different interface. And that's a perfect analogy, because you can have very real experiences in expanded states. Doesn't make this one any less real. So we say, so if I'm here in this made up reality, let's make the most of it.
right, right. And not think that it's truly all there is, by any means. And that allows us to relax inside of this game that we're in a little bit, when we realize we have options, we have choice, in terms of what else we can dial into and have a greater understanding about what we're seeing before us.
And so that leads to the big question people keep asking me these days is, the news is so distressing. The world is in such problems. Well, I remember picking up a book and reading, this world, is it ever going to change? Everything's going to hell. And then I looked and the copyright was 1946.
Yeah, I was going to say 1927. Yeah,
This
1946.
is
Exactly.
life. It will
Yes.
always be this way. It's love in full expression. That's my acronym for life. Love in full expression. So the challenge is our bodies weren't made to deal with world problems. They were designed for cavemen who deal with the tiger in your face, right? But we turn on the news and suddenly we carry the burden of a war here and a war there and people involved in genocide over there, and we feel helpless. So the issue is realizing that we're part of a very long game. It's not going to be resolved in this lifetime. So what difference can we make by seeing the bigger picture and doing what you can do in your aspect of this game right here, right now, to bring more light into the world, realizing that it's all part of the fullness, that there is a greater reality, and widening the lens. And
Beautiful.
yeah.
That's it. So we develop along the way in ourselves because we're allowing that to be the name of the game. We're unconditional in that development. We're not, posing the conditions of the outer world responding to what we're doing to determine the success of our project in life. Rather, we are here really evolving ourselves, and as a byproduct, we are a more stable, loving presence in the world. And if everyone was doing that, we'd have a very different dance going on, right?
That would be
So,
real fast evolution. That's the goal.
yes. So I know that you have a schedule today, and before we go, I want to make sure that we get to mention a little bit more about your new book that is coming out right now, and we'd love to just hear a little bit about that so we can pick it up.
Yeah, this one always connected. The subtitle, How to Find Comfort, Clarity, and Direction from the Spirit Within. And just like I mentioned earlier, it's helping everyone to realize there is this guidance that's available to us that is far deeper, wiser, and much more personal than using AI or Google or Siri. It's
Yeah.
just that we get great information, and I even give examples of what happened when I went to AI with a question and when I went to spirit. And it is so much more personal, so much more heartfelt, and we all can access that. So this book is filled with wondrous examples of interacting with evidence with spirit to show how real the greater reality is, but also a transmission of energy you can't deny. I mean, when I read it for the Audible in the studio, I I literally had to stop and go, wow. They had to cut that out of the Audible because just reading it back, it stunned me with the power and the wisdom that came through. Not my words, but the channel words. The book is a
Yes.
combination of uh, inspired writing and the channeling. So I know it will inspire people to show them what's possible, but also gives tips for how to have our own personal connection. So we have some promotions going too that will give some bonus gifts to anybody that pre-orders it before it comes out June 2nd.
Beautiful. We'll be right on that. Absolutely.
Right.
The link to all of that is in the show notes, and I want everyone to be able to recognize and plug in to all of that, because that is truly, truly what matters most. You know, in the world where we're being pulled externally even more and invited to no longer think and to just allow, our machines and our devices to do all of that for us. Something could so easily get lost along the way, and we're here to ensure that it doesn't. It not only doesn't, but that it becomes enhanced by conversations like this. So thank you so, so much, Suzanne, for being here and for sharing your wisdom and your full spectrum life experience with everyone here. I know that it brings a solidity to the opportunity to open and to be available to the divine really pouring through us in a constant fashion without us missing it. So, is there any last thing that you'd like to say?
I'm laughing because I've been invited to join a group from around the world of scientists and neurologists and doctors and professors to talk about consciousness and how to help our world with these kinds of discussions. And the person that invited me said, we need a few people in the room that make people uncomfortable. And I laughed and I said, well, that would be me.
That would be me. That's what we're here for. We're
Right?
stirring the pot.
Just squirm a little as I just invite everybody to be willing to step outside the box and say, what if? What if
Mm,
this is real? What if I can have that connection? And how will that improve not only my life, but our whole world as I turn up my light? Yeah.
yes, indeed. You know, I love bridging science and spirituality and bringing these truths together in such beautiful ways. And the evidential outcomes are always such a wonderful addition to the mix when we can prove some points in a whole new way. It's the new humanity that is birthing here. And thank you so much for being a part of that. I also want to thank our listeners for spending your time with us today on the Art of Awakening podcast, where we're blending science and spirituality constantly to create a life that you truly love living and where you truly get to express your whole, full, true self with freedom. Right. So until next time, I'm Dr. Sue Morter. Many blessings to you all, and bye bye for now.